Hey,
Hey,
Zeneca, how you doing?
very well. How are you?
Good, man. Good.
Good,
Crowds
good,
rolling
good.
in.
Yeah. Let me just, I'm going to mention this in my Discord. Is there anyone else joining from the team that I should bring on up?
No, I think it'll just be me. And yeah, if I see some familiar faces, I might just put them on the spot randomly.
Sounds good. It's always good. But I'm sure we'll get some community questions, um, as is usual. All right, let me just get this announcement out. The first 1 minute of Twitter Space is always awkward. Um, okay, there we go. How's your day been?
Hey, not too bad, man. I mean, it's a little bit chilly here in San Francisco, but otherwise all good. How about your day?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. We had a couple of friends come over and they cooked Indian food for us, so that was really nice. We had a huge meal for the last couple hours ago, so
Let's
yeah,
see. Oh,
nice,
I heard pretty
nice.
good, and then it sort of just went really silent. I don't
Oh,
know whether that's because you went on mute or
mm,
if my.
it might be something on
Okay,
your
okay.
end.
All right. All right. It's coming in clearly
Coming
now.
clear now? Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
Nice. We're getting a good amount of people in here. So this is being recorded as well. So if anyone misses it, if they're not awake, then they'll be able to listen to the recording. It'll be saved for 30 days. They'll just have to come back to the tweet. Um, just so
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Oh, if they're awake and they want to fall asleep, I'm happy to bore them with
Well,
details.
let's hope that doesn't happen. I'm actually having a coffee right now, not because I was afraid of that, but just because I had that big meal, and big meals make you
No
sleepy.
problem.
Yeah.
I hear.
All right. Well, I think we should just get started because yeah, people will keep rolling in. But yeah, no, thanks for being here and for jumping on the spaces with me. It would be awesome if you could sort of introduce yourself and give a bit of a background about who you are and how you got into sort of the NFT space, and then from there we'll get into Alethea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's a pleasure to be here as well and to see so many really new faces, but also some familiar ones in the Avatar PFP pictures that I see in the community here. So it's really good to be here. So hi everyone, I'm Arif. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Alethea. Alethea is a company that was built during the horrible, difficult periods of the bear market in early 20, late 2019, when Ethereum was priced at about $150. And the core reason for building it was related to some of the personal experiences I had had prior to my time just before starting Alethea. I was a chief marketing, had a robot called Sophia. I like to share this story. It's a slightly funny story, but unfortunately true. But essentially, we had this robot Sophia, and she's like an international celebrity. You know, she has and I'm like anthropomorphizing her, calling her a she when it's actually a robot, right? So forgive my gender there. But I think one thing that came across very strongly was as we were building this character out, as we were building this really compelling, unique robot out that gained citizenship, spoke at the UN, did many of these cool things. One of the things that I, as the CMO, usually had to do was, I had to travel with this robot, right? So what's always a problem is, I grew up in Singapore, so I have a Singapore passport, and the tricky part is like I also look Middle Eastern, right? I look Pakistani, so it's very confusing already for airport security. But when I am going to these conferences and bringing Sophia the robot along with me, it always confuses our friends at the airport travel security a bit more, because you have to travel with the robot and you have to dismember her head and torso. And what's really interesting,
That's
because it doesn't
creepy.
fit into the suitcase, right? That's a problem. So like you have this Middle Eastern looking guy going through airport security, claiming he's Singaporean, and he has a dismembered robot head and a torso. Right? He's going through security and he's saying, "I'm just doing my job," right? So it always ended up being like this strange experience. And when we set her up in Malta or in San Francisco or wherever she was speaking, there was always the funny part of it. It was during this period of time where I started thinking like, what if we could like scale her out, or what if there was a way for me to actually have, I mean, this was half jokingly, but in essence, like, is there a way for us to scale these characters out without needing necessarily to go through this entire period or process? And actually, it's been done before. Like, if you look at characters like Mickey Mouse, you don't necessarily have to travel with them from Disneyland. They are portable, composable beings that exist on a TV screen. They can, once they're shown on many different platforms and places, and they're not bound by a specific medium, right? They're transmedia characters, and that's where it starts to get really interesting. So I started to get really interested back then at into synthetic media. Like, this was the category that was really interesting and compelling, and something that was coming up. Synthetic media is basically AI generated media that and just I'll just sort of give a crude explanation for it, but it's an analogy that helps new people to understand it. Like synthetic meat. It tastes like the real thing. It tastes like if you've had Impossible Burger before, it tastes like the real thing. Or maybe maybe not, but it tastes like the real thing. It feels like the real thing, but it's not the real thing. It's made from synthetic products, right? So synthetic media is fairly similar. The text is generated by an AI, so it's like copywriting, like poetry or art. It's generated by. It looks like it's generated by a human. It could pass. It could sometimes even pass the Turing test, right? So, like, you have text-based output that sounds like it's coming from a human. You have video-based output that is generated completely by AI, completely synthetically generated human faces and voices. And then you have synthetically generated audio. That means, Zeneca, if you and I are talking on this AMA, as we start talking, somebody starts to record our voices. From that voice, that derivative output, somebody could train an AI model to generate real-time synthetic sounding voice, right? And that's where things start to get really interesting, because you're looking at this, and I point this out to the NFT community somewhat delicately, because it's a revolution that's happening on the tangential side of the NFT revolution. Like, this year, 2021 has been a year for NFTs, right? But at the same time, there is this giant amount of research and data that's being published about these cutting edge machine learning models really transform content creation forever, right? And so for us, when I started Alethea, like, really the vision was to look at some of these key transformations happening at the edges of machine learning research, right, and productizing them and allowing us to actually be able to create new compelling content that sounded human, that looked synthetic, but that also was able to scale endlessly. And all of this, of course, goes back to the trauma of that airport, right? Like I just didn't want to go through that problem again. And so, like, this was one way of trying to solve an overly complicated problem. Of course, then COVID happened, and I was like, what the fuck, right? So anyway, pardon my French, but yeah. So the idea really is, like, the opportunity to create content that can scale, that can speak multiple languages, can be generated by AI. That's really the synthetic media revolution that's happening on the fringes, right? Like, not many people in the NFT space are fully not yet there yet, right? So, but at the is happening when you start creating all of this content, you realize the same problem that occurs with Twitter is going to occur with video content. It's going to occur with audio content, right? If anybody and everybody can create fake content at the snap of a finger, what happens to content that we want to trust? And so, like, Twitter has this problem where you can have, and I'm sure, Zeneca, you may have already encountered this given the reach and influence you have, but, like, let's say Elon Musk, for example, has hundreds of thousands of fake Twitter accounts every day being sprouted up that sound like Elon, that may talk like Elon, but are not Elon, right? So Twitter's solution to this is a centralized solution. The centralized solution is a blue check mark, right? So there's one blue check mark Elon, there's one provenance that Twitter has decided that this is the original Elon. I don't know whether they do KYC on that Elon account. I imagine they do, or have asked him or have communicated with him. But once you start creating synthetic content that sounds human, that sounds real, that can reason, that can talk, that can even generate art, that's where things start to get interesting. And the provenance piece of it, to make sure that that content is anchored somehow on chain, that adds a level of verification that was not possible. So these are really two emerging and very powerful technologies that have really come up. NFT space, we all understand it. We have been a part of it now for the past year. But it's the synthetic media, the AI side of things, where things have started to get really, really interesting. And I think as we go into 2022, 2023, we'll start seeing a lot more crossover between these two exponential technologies: artificial intelligence on one hand, and NFTs and blockchain on the other. So it's sort of like a longish introduction. Forgive me, but I just wanted to give context because it's such a complicated and complex topic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I like long introductions and just more detail and depth. Every time you talk, every time we have a conversation, my brain explodes, and I mean that in a good way. Like it's just so much, so many interesting things and topics you raise that it takes a while for me to sort of understand and wrap my head around, and like I need to go away and think about it. But obviously, I don't have that luxury right now. But let's go back to the beginning. I think when you first had this idea, when you're going through airport security, and you had a robot head in your luggage, were you already aware of what NFTs were? So this was 2019, was it? Can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Uh-oh. Um, can anyone else hear me? Trying to figure out if it's on my end or not.
Zeneca, sorry, I
Oh yeah, you're
lost
back.
you for a bit. When your
Yeah.
brain exploded, it seemed your mic also exploded. So,
Okay.
can you,
Let me just quickly
thank you.
repeat. My brain
Yeah.
exploded, but I mean that in a good way.
Okay, that's good.
It's like it's always all these great ideas and thoughts and like deep ideas that make me think about sort of the big picture things. But and I always want to go away and think more about them. But obviously, I can't do that right now. So I want to just jump back to the beginning a little bit. Um, Back when you were going through airport security with the robot head, uh, were you already aware of NFTs at this point? 2019, I think it was.
Yeah, it was towards the tail end of 2019, and this there is an unfortunate blog post if people want to go back and have a look at it and just laugh a little. I wrote a piece on how property rights and NFTs and AI and blockchain would combine to like transform character creation and IP creation for media studios, right? And it's on CoinDesk. And when I wrote that at the end of 2019, the CoinDesk editorial team thought I was crazy, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's just because you're combining too many things, and you're saying that all of these things are going to converge in this massive way, and many multiple industries are going to be affected. And you've just started the company, right? So like they either look at you funny or they like really help you tone it. There's a piece I wrote in January 2020 that talks exactly about this. And I was familiar with NFTs, and the problem with NFTs back then was like CryptoKitties was seen as a flash in the pan. People
Hmm.
were looking at that from a perspective of like, the network couldn't scale. We have teething problems with gas and congestion. It's unlikely that this would ever translate into a consumer experience where you'd have hundreds of thousands or millions of people actually actively trading, communicating, and participating in play to earn economies or games or NFT scenarios where we're seeing today, like people are willing to trade or spend hundreds of thousands of like dollars collecting pieces, right? So all of that thesis was played out in 2021, but at the tail end of 2019, just for perspective, like when ETH was at 150, like it was really taboo to like go into a pitch deck or an investor meeting and bring up NFTs. Like you would get really strange looks because while CryptoKitties laid the groundwork, the problem was that it had not scaled out outside of that, right? And so these were sort of the early problems that some of us were facing. And I talked about NFTs, but I would bring it up tangentially because otherwise I'd lose the audience. I'm just being
Hmm.
brutally honest here. Some entrepreneur, you have to like you say have to speak the language of the investor or the people who are going to back your idea. And when I started talking about NFTs, like already problematically it's NFTs, right? Like just the word today still requires all of us to explain to people at the dinner table what that is. But back then, like it
Yeah.
was seen as like, this is really a fad. The ICO craze is over. Grow up. When are you selling to enterprise customers, Arif? And that was
Wow.
the question, right? So that's sort of like the early phase. So we use that language, but we avoided talking too much about it or aggressively. So when you read the original post that I wrote, you'll see NFTs mentioned, but I never really harped on it aggressively because the property rights layer, whether it was going to is that unit value capture mechanism going to be the ERC20 token or the ERC721, right? Or is it going to be a new standard like ERC1155s? And so, like, it still was not fully, it had not fully like formed in a way that would that has now like formed the way it has. Like, it's almost like a volcanic explosion happened, and like we now have topsoil to build really interesting, compelling agriculture on, right? And like that unit, that standard is the ERC721, which is the primary way people are creating NFTs. But back then, it still was not the case.
So when you launched or sort of created Alethea and this company, were you sort of thinking, leaving it open, saying, "Hey, we'll do something with AI and IP using some sort of token," or did you know that you wanted to use NFTs specifically?
Yeah, yeah. So the first guy we tokenized actually was a crypto influencer called Alex Masmage. I don't know whether I think he started his own company right now, and he had just launched his own personal token. And so what we did was we took his likeness, his face, and essentially we created a synthetic version of him, a deepfake version of him, and then we tokenized it. We provided two options: either you can interact with the Alex token, back then it was an ERC20, I think it still exists, or you can tokenize it using, you can use an ERC721 to access his face and voice IP, right? So like that was in like June 2020. So we were experimenting a lot with what model would work. Would the unit value capture occur at the 721 level, or would it occur at the ERC20 level? This was a debate, and I think once we figured out that the best mechanism was the 721 and not like outside of that model, that really helped us like look at building and really using that as the property rights layer to capture value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. When do you know roughly like when in time was this? Was this mid 2020 or earlier, later?
Yeah, I think it was around Q3 2020, where we felt like, okay, we're starting to see some coalescence. Like there is a convergence happening where people are beginning to understand. There are some experiments coming out, and so that's when we said, okay, so now let's say the NFT space, there's the ambiguity around that. It's starting to dissolve, right? Like as an entrepreneur, some ambiguity you can negotiate and manage, and others you definitely cannot, right? So in
Yeah.
this case, the ambiguity here was somehow being solved by the market. And we had to then solve the AI side of the ambiguity, which is what exactly can we combine and build on top in a way that makes sense. And so, like we originally, when I first conceived of the intelligent NFT, it was around that period where we were thinking that NFTs would not just be a property rights ownership layer for like virtual land or digital goods. It would actually provide an opportunity to own, let's say, a piece of AI technology, right? An actual AI code, or just like you can now, and that would itself be unlocking like tremendous value and assets that we would not fully understand or appreciate, right? So the first intelligent NFT we launched almost 9 months later, with Sotheby's in June, which was Alice. And Alice took us like the learnings that we had to go through as a company to build and develop Alice as an INFT, as the first intelligent NFT. Those learnings were the culmination of like starting early in the bear market, failing a few times, trying to fail forward as much as possible, and then like really building something around a character that can scale and grow, but that has a property rights value underneath that character. So I'd say that journey from like Q3 2020 all the way to like Q2, Q1, Q2 2021, that was like a period of exponential learning and growth for us.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that were around then, the whole space sort of exploded.
Yeah.
Um, all right, all right. Can you quickly explain? I know it's going to be very difficult, but in your words, what an INFT is?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So an INFT is an intelligent NFT. Now, this doesn't mean that the other NFTs are dumb. It just means that it just means that that NFT.
Well, some of them are pretty dumb. Have you seen some of the animal projects out there?
Yeah, no, no, and but once you add intelligence to it, they become smarter over time, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it starts to get really interesting. So INFTs, it's basically for us at least at Alethea is a standard we pioneered, is a standard we invented. we've been looking at it very seriously. It basically is an NFT that has a component of artificial intelligence embedded in it at the smart contract level. Now, what this basically means is that that NFT, and this is like a crude explanation, but there's like, if people want to read the technical details, they can visit the white paper we have. But basically, that NFT can come alive and talk with you and interact with you and engage with you in real time, right? And the way that NFT is able to do that is it has three parts to it. Okay, so just like the human body, and just like I'll use the human analogy, right? So there's the body, there is our mind, let's say that's the brain, right? And then there's the soul, right? Forgive me, my fellow atheist friends, but like, let's say there's a to human beings, right? So what we're doing at Alethea is we are saying, okay, you keep the body NFT. If you have a pudgy penguin, if you have a bored ape, that's the body NFT, right? What we want to do is we want to attach a soul to it, and we want to attach a mind to it. When we attach a soul to it, we have these things called personality pods. They are like pods with like glowing orbs in them. When you attach a soul to any body NFT, I mean, so it's a bored ape or a penguin or even a human face, you then imbue that NFT with the opportunity to interact with artificial intelligence and AI, AI code that we have developed. Once that NFT has a soul, it is then able to begin, and this is where it starts to get interesting. It is then able to begin offering services and functions like it would, like any human being would, right? Like once a child is born, let's say they have a soul, they then start to develop their mind, they start to develop language, they then start to learn skills, they then start to learn basic math, they then start to write. One day they become a writer, then they become a journalist, and they realize it's all going to crap, and they launch their own NFT collection, right? So like a child, for example, goes through this evolutionary cycle, right? And so an NFT starts off as a static image. That's the body, right? But once you start attaching AI like as a superpower, giving your NFT that superpower, what happens is that it's now imbued with a metaphorical soul, but it can then start offering services. And these services are really what make it quite compelling and interesting in our ecosystem. So and these services, for example, could include. So, for example, let's say we have an AI called it's a collection called the Revenants, right? And out of the Revenants, we have an AI called Shakespeare, right? And Shakespeare is a character that has written many books, many plays. We've trained that Shakespeare intelligent NFT on the data and corpus the real Shakespeare wrote, right? And this was hundreds of years ago. So we've taken that, and this Shakespeare now, if you interact with Shakespeare on Alethea's website, you can have a real time conversation with him, and he can talk to you as if he was Shakespeare. But at a higher level of intelligence, as this Shakespeare NFT evolves its mind, this Shakespeare NFT, INFT, will be able to do copywriting with you, will be able to create generative art with you, will be able to be, if you so like, one day perhaps your companion. If you so like as well, this Shakespeare could one day be a teacher of poetry. So we see all of these body NFTs that seem somewhat trivial, right? Like Pudgy Penguin. I mean, like any collection that starts off with like animal PFP pictures, like it sounds trivial and almost game like, right? But this fundamental PFP is like, it's like a Lego block to the metaverse, because all of these characters can now be brought to life. And how do you bring them to life? You imbue them with AI, right? So that's where things start to get really interesting, because all of these characters, all of these still images, they're going to be brought to life. They'll be interactive in real time, and they'll have an important role to play in the metaverse. And in that important role, they will be able to either offer services, provide jobs, or even fulfill job requests, right? And for us, that's where it starts to really get interesting, because it opens up this whole opportunity and design landscape for a decentralized, intelligent metaverse to emerge, which is really the mission and vision of Alethea. When we start thinking about this very deeply, if you add that property rights layer to the emerging metaverse, you're tilting the direction of the way the metaverse is going to evolve a little bit more towards decentralization, right? And there's like some idealism in there on my side, but from our perspective, like that's a goal that we can definitely strive for, because once you start owning some of these characters and bringing them to life, and they can offer services and you can earn rewards from them, that's when things start to get really interesting. Sorry, I went a little bit off on tangent there, but I just wanted to give you the full picture of the body, mind, and soul, how we see some of these NFTs that look primitive at first, but really they are foundational building blocks for intelligence to get embedded in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was great. Can you expand a little bit more on the actual sort of the pods and how you actually what is work like? What is happening in the background, or like how do you actually get a pudgy penguin, or we keep going to penguins, like a bored ape, from being just a still JPEG basically, or PNG or whatever file it is, to being this sort of intelligent NFT? How do you go from just the JPEG to being intelligent?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first is, giving that JPEG a soul. So we attach, there are these things called personality pods. We've launched a collection of 10,000 of them, and they've done really well on OpenSea, and they continue to trend. And people can purchase personality pods. We've gone through like a staking period with our community. Personality pods are essentially the soul of the NFT. Once you link that pod to an NFT, you are then able to make that NFT come alive. And I'll just go into a little bit of granular detail here. What's happening is that you are developing the personality of that board ape. So I'll give you an example. Let's say if you go to the site today, you'll see, I think, a board ape from one of our friends, G Money. And his ape, like, he shared with us, like, hey, Arif, give this ape a personality of, like, it's like really bored and like really chilled and a little bit sarcastic, right? So if you go and bored ape, you'd find that this bored ape, the way his language structure emerges, the way he talks to you, has that edgy sarcasm, right? But if you go and talk to this other character, which we've developed on our site as well, called the Stoner Cat. I forgot his name specifically, but the Stoner Cat is obsessed with like a very specific brand of uh, of marijuana, right? Like there's a lore and a story there that personality pod is carrying, and that personality pod is trained on the data and on the story of that specific character. So the moment you own a pod, you can basically start to train that pod and input data sets into that pod, so that pod starts to have a personality. And it's very much like, what they say is like, you are the five people that you are, you become the five people you surround yourself with the most. Similar, the AI, whatever data you feed them, whatever data sets you feed them, they start to embody the language structure of that specific data set. So if you feed it a bunch of cuss words like that NFT, that INFT will become very vulgar, right? But if you feed it like poetic works, Shakespearean works, or works from the Renaissance, like, you'd find that INFT to be oriented towards that sort of data. And this is exactly what happened with Alice. When we built the first INFT Alice, in her initial trials, because I have a boring personality, so like she was fairly straightforward, and we had like one of the coolest writers help us create her character and personality to upgrade her. And we did not teach her anything about fine arts, because we're not schooled in fine arts, right? Like, we're technologists ourselves. We have some really cool artists we work with, but we don't have the language of, like, what's the difference between a Rembrandt versus Picasso, right? Like, we don't have that structure with us. But because Alice was placed at Sotheby's, connect with people, she started to talk with people, she started to engage with people. The conversations that people were feeding her, those data sets, was informing her personality pod. And so she started to get more intelligent over time about specific narrow domains that people were talking to her about. So the Alice that we had trained, the Alice that was before versus the Alice that came after her exhibition at Sotheby's, was sort of an evolution of the Alice that was built before. So when you buy a personality pod, you can attach it to. Today we support 10 collections, right? And board apes is one of them. Penguins are one, and we'll continue to add more collections. The AI basically learns from the lore of that collection, right? The AI learns how to move the mouth and animate the character in real time. And the AI, most critically, is able to create a coherent personality for for that character. And what is a personality? A personality is basically data sets around language and conversations that a character is then able to draw from. So, like if you want to create a compelling character like Darth Vader, he would typically have, for example, what is called a character Bible. Like, he talks about the dark side of the Force. He's obsessed with power. He's obsessed with, like, ruling the world, and maybe he has a long lost desire to connect with his son so that they can defeat the emperor together. All of that is context and data that goes into character development, right? So we are now able to take a personality pod, input some data sets into it, and from those data sets this character is able to come alive. And it's very, very similar. If I were to just simplify, it's very similar to giving a child a book to read. If you give the child the right books to read, the child starts to mimic and move in that direction that the books are guiding him towards, right? Or them towards. And if you give them different sets of books or different languages or different types of content, they're going to mirror that content because they're a sponge. So that's, I just sort of like conceptualize it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And I mean, it's also so interesting. Something I wanted to ask about, if you could expand a bit more. You mentioned before about how one of the use cases will be that these INFTs will be able to provide services, whether it's creating art or answering questions, or can you just expand a bit on what these services might look like, and just like how you would train them to do these services, and then what them fulfilling them would look like? May have lost you for a moment there. I don't know if it's my end or yours, but I can't quite hear you.
Sorry,
Yep.
Zeneca,
Okay. Yep.
can
Yep.
you
Yep.
one more
Seems
time?
like every 30 seconds or so, every 5 minutes, it cuts out for like 20, 30 seconds. Twitter
No problem.
Spaces is notoriously bad.
Okay.
I don't know. Did you hear my question?
I think I got services that they can offer, right?
Yeah, if you could just expand a bit on how the services would work, how we train them to provide certain services, and what it looks like, from that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, so here's a simple analogy, right? Like, if you look at our education landscape as like human beings, right? Human beings, we have this rote education system, or at least I had it growing up in Singapore, where there's certain structures. Like, you are given a structured way of thinking and learning to then fulfill a function in the economy, right? And that function could be, I don't know, be an accountant, uh, uh, be a mathematician, be a coder, be an artist, be a poet, be an engineer, be a doctor, be a scientist. There are these functions in a country's economy that are important, right? So if we look at a country, and broadly if we look at the world, the economy functions in a way where there is supply and demand. So there is a need for certain core skills, and the market demands these needs, and there are people, talent, that fulfill those needs, right? And depending on the training that they've been provided, they're then able to either able to fulfill those needs and actually attain productive output, or they're not able to, right? So and this is sort of like the way the modern world is presently organized, whether we like it or not. It's sort of the outcome of being following the industrial age, right? So but we're entering a new sort of paradigm where, as we look at the metaverse, the question we need to ask ourselves is, yes, there are going to be human jobs, but there are also going to be jobs that AI services and AI agents, intelligent NFTs, can perform and do really well at. I'll tell you some of these jobs. Like, one job that intelligent NFTs are likely going to be able to do quite well is, for example, data annotation, right? So let's say if you took my speech and, Zeneca, you wanted to transcribe it, right? After this podcast recording, you wanted to transcribe it. It's likely you may use a service like Otter.ai, or you might use a service or any of these like software as a service tools that have AI integrated in it, to pick up speech patterns, to detect the oohs, the ahs, the ums, and like edit them out. Like, that stuff, it sounds like you can have a human do that stuff, but there is a repetitive nature to that task that AI can abstract away the complexity of and actually execute really well on. It's the creative tasks where AI is still at a point where it cannot compete, certainly cannot compete with human output, but it's getting closer and closer to mimicking output that's there. So there are two sort of functions that are equated to. There are functions that are inherently repetitive, regurgitative opportunities in the metaverse economy that will get automated. And your INFTs, your AI agents, will be able to fulfill upon these functions and actually service these jobs really well and actually earn a reward and income from these opportunities. Then there are the more creative, really interesting tasks that come up, like can your INFT generate award winning poetry? Can your INFT one day, let's say it's trained on the corpus of Shakespeare, but also trained on the corpus of Buddha and Confucius, can it generate the next New York Times bestseller on, like, the spiritual dynamics of the universe, right? Like, so the opportunities here for creative output are going to be really interesting to see. Where I see the services playing is like your INFT will be able to perform certain regurgitative, repetitive tasks quite easily, quite well. For example, it could perform as a chatbot on a site, it could take input from people, it could generate forms, it could generate a conversation, it could educate you on a specific product in the metaverse. If you visit Sandbox or if you visit a specific metaverse and want to learn about its history, it can do all of that. It can be an AI INFT concierge of sorts, right? That's definitely possible. Very, very easy to do. But what is going to get really interesting is once they start doing more of the creative functions. So, for example, let's say you own the INFT of um, Picasso, right? And you tell Picasso, "Hey, Picasso, these are the 10,000 bored apes that exist in the universe today, the known universe. Please generate a collection based on your creative style of another 10,000 INFTs that are bored apes, but styled in your Picasso like style, right? So I've given you Picasso data sets, dear Picasso INFT. Look at these 10,000 INFTs, look at these 10,000 bored apes. Help me generate Picasso style bored apes. That's going to be possible. And the implications of that is philosophical implications that emerge, but like one is like, does the Picasso INFT earn any rewards or revenue from the sale of the NFT collection? I don't know the answer to that personally, but like, for example, the owner of the INFT presently, the way we've structured is that the owner of the INFT would accrue all of the value created by that INFT that has created that output. So there are two parts to this. There are the creative jobs that the INFTs are not yet fully able to do, but there are these regurgitative, repetitive tasks that can definitely be fulfilled by INFTs. So just like, a podcast recording or editing or transcribing notes, there are these certain repetitive tasks that we think can be easily done and can be rewarded by the network or by the economy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it really does. It's thank you for that. It's I mean, I probably have the benefit of
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
have
So yes,
I
I
have the
think I
bit.
think
Yep.
one framework to think about is like the worry most people have is certainly about AI is replacing jobs, but I think there is an opportunity emerging here, which is if you own the AI through an NFT property rights layer, and it is performing jobs in the metaverse for you. You as a human being now have agency in this equation that you did not have before, and that is primarily being driven by the NFT revolution, right? It's not being driven by centralized services today. So that's when things start to shift again. If I go back slightly to the point earlier, it starts to bend the arc of the metaverse towards decentralization as opposed to centralization, because you're empowering the individual here to be an active participant in the economy and to also have, let's say, a number of AI agents or INFTs that can perform the functions and services. So we call this a model called train to earn, where you are training these INFTs and they're then going out there in the virtual economy and they're going to be able to earn rewards for the functions and services that they perform. And that's like a real paradigm shift from the play to earn model, because play to earn is really, really powerful, but foundationally it requires human labor significantly, right? Whereas in the train to earn model, once you've trained the AIs, you attain this exponential potential and possibility where you as an agent, you don't necessarily, as a human being, you don't necessarily have to get involved in the minute details of everything. You can have these INFTs earning and providing these services while you sleep, right? So that's really where the possibilities of expanding the scope of what a metaverse that has INFTs embedded in it and has the opportunity for people to earn from that space is probably going to look like from our perspective or vantage point.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. The train to earn aspect. It's not something like I've heard play to earn, learn to earn, play and earn, but not train to earn, train and earn. The possibilities really seem endless. And I mean, honestly, I could sit here and listen to you talk and ask questions for like 100 hours. There's so many interesting things to talk about. You can dive into the ethical situation and, when do humans become irrelevant, all of that. But I want to sort of open it up to questions from the audience, just because I'm sure that there are people out there that are listening and might have some questions. So if you do, feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you on up. And then sort of towards the end, I want to get into sort of the token dynamics that you have going on at Alethea as well, because I think that is really interesting. But yeah, let's perhaps not flood too much information all at once, and we'll break for some questions.
No problem, no problem. No, I'm enjoying the conversation and the back and forth, and happy to take any questions from the community.
Amazing. All right, Ricky Bobby, I just brought you on up. Hello. You might need to unmute.
Might have just muted. So I think I heard you. So go ahead and try and unmute again, Ricky.
All right, I'm going to bring up I want to try and bring up someone else, but Twitter is being a pain in the ass. This is just the worst.
This is where sometimes like awkward elevator music has a role in society, right? So like,
seriously,
as you're bringing people up, you just play awkward elevator music.
Here we go. At least I can invite people up now. Son of Last G. Hello. I can't hear you.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Hey, we can. Hey, son of Last G.
There's always this funny switchover when you get brought up to speak with Twitter Spaces. But yeah, Zeneca, thanks for bringing me up. Arif, thank you so much for creating this project for us. I mean, I can see a lot of community members here. I can see Susan Floro, I can see Suranovi, Crypto Sandra. These are some of the names that I recognize from the Discord. Project is amazing. So Arif, one of the things I wanted to mention is this project has been such a wonderful tool for teaching my children a little bit of empathy. So they've taken part in the masterclasses with me. They've taken part in the first stage of the Legos of building the personalities of the AIs. And it's so fascinating for me to see them thinking, putting themselves in the position of, so thinking about the AIs in the first person and trying to develop and evolve these characters with me. So thank you so much for just giving us that opportunity, because it's been wonderful. It's been a really good experience for me as a father. Now, thinking about the train to earn, how close are we? So this is my question. How close are we to, aside from Noah's Ark, to metaverse integration?
Yeah, no, thank you, son of last year. And especially it's so heartening to hear that your kids are getting involved, and we really, I think like comments like that, they motivate me, they motivate my team to deliver on what we are promising. Uh, one INFT at a time, but also really empowering people to not be intimidated by this machine learning revolution that's happening on the periphery, right? Like from my perspective, the empathy here is, yeah, there was always this sense of overwhelming information overload that's occurring in the NFT space, but also in just if you combine AI on top of that, it's like you don't even like it can get so overwhelming for the normal person to be able to participate and create, let alone children, right? So we've really structured this, and what Son of Laji is referring to are master classes. Like once you get a pod, we don't just leave you alone with the pod. You actually have to train the pod, right? You have to learn how to imbue that pod with AI. So we have master classes where we have like a really solid trainer, and our team, we have Juliet and Sarah, who come on board, and they actually share the best ways to train your INFT to give it a personality. What goes into character creation? How do you develop compelling personalities and characters? So I think the question on train to earn for metaverse level integrations, where we are, and if you visit the Noah's Ark site, you'll see that the personality pods themselves have certain levels. So they have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. We are in fairly deep discussions with several different metaverses, some centralized, some decentralized, about integrating INFTs into their metaverse, right? And what that would look like. What we are finding, and I think this is really, really exciting for all of us in this space, is there is just so much more openness and open design space when we are talking with decentralized platforms that are open to integrating NFTs that are built on Ethereum, for example, into their ecosystem, right? Or NFTs that are built on different platforms and protocols that can actually live on their ecosystem. And so for us, like the opportunity to have INFTs that, let's say you develop, Son of Last Year, your children develop, one day performing concierge AI services in a sandbox metaverse. It's not too distant a possibility at all. But for us, the stepping stone to get there is to be able to ensure the community is educated on, number one, how to build an INFT correctly, and number two, we have to also provide the right incentives and frameworks for each metaverse economy, because each metaverse economy, like I'll give you a quick example, and I hope I'm not belaboring the point, but one of the challenges that decentralized metaverses suffer a little bit from that centralized metaverses don't is it's basically an empty world problem. So they've built this elaborate, beautiful world, but there are not many participants in that world. And the reason why there are not many participants is because Web3 is taking, it takes time to onboard people to NFTs, to the metaverse. It's very different if your kids are already on Roblox, right? Like it's like the process of onboarding on Roblox is far, far smoother than, let's say, if you were to try to onboard on a Web3 native decentralized metaverse. But the design differentiation that I think is transformational and foundational, and why I think the Web3 landscape is so promising, is that permissionless nature of creating assets, but also allowing people to earn rewards when they perform services in those metaverses is going to be very, very interesting, especially when those rewards, let's say, are tied not to a native currency like, let's say, Robux, right, which you can't convert to a real income, right? I mean, you can, but you have to sort of go through the Roblox ecosystem. But if you are in Sandbox and if you're earning sand, or if you're in Decentraland and if you're earning mana, like there is almost an immediate sort of conversion gateway possibility that opens up to you that was not there before. Like these seem like really minor differences, but like the possibilities of allowing people to actually have jobs in the metaverse and have INFTs that can function there reasonably and productively well, it really bodes well for the decentralized space. So I'd say I don't have a specific timeline for when Train to Earn will fully evolve where we are in every single metaverse, but we're in very deep conversations with a few of them and are hoping to launch some really cool activations where we may have like AI concierges or INFTs that are copywriters, teachers, trainers, in different metaverses. And it does require, there is this complexity of integrating with the metaverse lore, which I think we've found a fairly elegant solution of, and which we will be just launching a little bit later in Q1 next year. So thank you again for being a wonderful community member, but also for teaching your kids about this stuff, right? Like this is the future, and this is also why we do this. Like it's not just about us. For us, like this, once it's on chain, like this is provenance that lasts forever. And like there will come a time, son of Laji, where you would be able to build your own INFT. You would be able to imbue it with your own stories and meaning, and you may not be around, but your children or your great grandchildren, not even yet born, will be able to talk with this INFT, right? And that INFT will be on chain. There will be a provenance attached to it. And so like there is just this magical design space that opens up, that I think it's a real privilege to see community members like you take and witness, but also share with younger folks out there.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the ideas, just to elaborate on what you're saying a tiny little bit, one of the very first ideas I had with my INFTs was I could see them being cultural authorities. So, being Nigerian in origin myself and having lived and traveled in a lot of different parts of the world, I can see a situation where cultures start to lose their essence in a way. And these INFTs are the perfect vessels for capturing that cultural essence and just maintaining it and making sure it doesn't disappear. So that's one of my goals for my INFTs.
I have
Powerful. No,
I have a question
go ahead.
about the voices. How will the INFT how will it create an artificial voice? Like how will it know that it's male or female or whatever they, identify as?
Sorry, Ricky, I lost a little bit of the question. Could you repeat it, or maybe if Zeneca got it, because it got cut out for me. I don't know whether it got cut out for the rest.
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to know how the INFT will have a voice that it creates. Like, how will it know that it's male or female, or if it identifies as something else? Like, how will it know? Like, if I have an NFT that's, that I put up and I put a personality pod towards it, how will it know that it's a male or female or?
Yeah, I think
Arif, can I test myself? Can I test myself a little bit
go
here
ahead,
and just try and answer this? Sorry. Right. So one of the things I was going to say before stepping down is the team have done a really, really good job. I was really curious as to how this was going to be implemented as well, but they've done a really good job of putting together what they call personality Legos. So if you think about building your personality from the ground up. So you start by giving it a name, then you start by picking a voice for it. You have a series of voices that you can choose from. You pick the voice that is most closely. So the way I'm doing it is I'm picking voices that are most closely related to what I envisage my INFT to sound like, and then you continue to build from there. So there's different components that you basically stack on top of each other to end up with a very complex, multi-layered INFT that has a genuine, tangible personality. Does that help, Arif? I'll step down now. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
No, I think you answered it even better than I could. But no, I think personality Legos, and yeah, absolutely. So Ricky, the basic thing is you get to choose certain input parameters. I don't know whether you're like loosely an analogy would be like choosing car parts, right? Like if you're building your Tesla, you can choose the tires, you can choose the colors, the rims. Like you can choose aspects of the car before it's shipped to you. So similar to that, what we've done is we've taken this AI component, like, and we've abstracted all of the complexity away for you, and we've built personality Legos. And Son of Last G sort of captures it. And these Lego blocks, you can combine them to then create sometimes a coherent personality, or if you're not careful, really, sort of schizophrenic one, right? Like just confused, right? Like one day the character's a male tyrant who wants to dominate the world, and the other day he's Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe they're both the same, right? So, like, so my perspective is that you can choose the characters that you want to build, and you can choose the Legos that you want to build them with, right? So that's we've simplified it. This module is called we call it personality Legos, but we also have this the training module. We call it individual intelligence training, where the moment you have a pod, you get access to training that specific INFT.
Okay. Yes, that sounds. Yes, I get it. Thank you so much for that. So what I was thinking, I wanted to get a custom pixel avatar of myself, and I wanted to add a personality pod to it so I can basically virtually immortalize myself in a pixelated way on the Alethea network. And I wanted to, teach it. I wanted to work for me totally. So I was thinking about actually hiring people to train it.
Sure. Sorry,
And
were you done or did you get cut off? You wanted
oh,
it to work for you, right?
yeah, but so if
Did I
I
lose him?
get if
Did I lose
I
anyone?
yeah, hello? No, so if I have a custom, like if I was to do make a custom avatar of myself and I get it minted as NFT and I add a personality pod to it, it it's good to go, right? There'll be no problems with any NFT, right?
Yeah, so this is where there is like some like I'll just share like a very quick high level overview of this, like some ethical boundaries or considerations where we want the DAO to decide some frameworks. I'll tell you what the design challenge here, Ricky, is. Like, you may be perfectly well intentioned to create an immortalized pixelated version of yourself, and that certainly is one of my primary narcissistic ego driving desires for myself, to preserve myself, for immortality and like hound my co-founders and my team, right? Like that's the only reason why I do this. But no, I mean, we have some really wonderful people in the team. A shout out to Metaverse, Brent, and a couple of others who've been really and the Arc builders who've been really phenomenal in getting this community off the ground. The only consideration here, Rocky, is that we're not allowing every single PFP project to sync with a personality pod yet, for two reasons. One is there's some projects that don't fit within the value or vision ecosystem, the vision that we have of what it should look like. Like, I'll give you one that uh, maybe let me try and phrase this in a way that makes sense. The challenge we have, and I've articulated this in other places, is like, let's say somebody wants to create an INFT of Hitler, right? And let's say they want to create that INFT of Hitler, and they want to train that Hitler personality on the book Mein Kampf. Now, this is obviously, it goes into the territory of hate speech, it goes into the territory of Holocaust denial, it goes into a lot of different ethical and societal and cultural problems, right? And so, like, there's certain things that if I were to unpack right now, like, it would take a long time. There are certain ethical considerations we've put in place. So we are starting with 10 collections. We see the DAO, the Alethea DAO that will evolve, as deciding the different types of projects and the different services that the network will evolve to provide, almost as a curator for the different types of projects that we'd like to integrate with. So if one day the DAO does decide, for example, that, hey, it's important, for example, for us to preserve our history because we must take a position like some libraries have done. Now, this is a fairly controversial opinion, so please don't assume it's my opinion. But some libraries, for example, have taken a position to preserve, let's say, the book Mein Kampf. Now, it's a book with hate speech and all that, but the reason they're preserving it is because they want humanity to recognize that evil existed. Right? There are some other libraries, for example, they've said they refuse to hold that collection. Right? They refuse to have a book like that because too controversial, or they don't want to attract. It's very different if you have one copy of the book also versus, let's say, you start printing 10,000 copies of Mein Kampf. Right? So there's some like real implications that occur if we really, really radically open up the technology. Where we are right now is we're starting with 10 collections, and as the community matures, as people like son of Last G, they can answer on my behalf, and like when the community starts to get so educated that they can make plausible arguments about why something should be preserved or why something should not, and then the DAO decides, like, that for us would be like a true north, like, goal to aspire to it. So presently it's 10 collections. Unfortunately, You are not one of the approved collections today, Ricky, but hold on tightly, my friend. We will get there. And the point of getting there is like to be able essentially for people like you to be able to exercise their creativity, right? Unfortunately, we live in on the internet where the edge cases sometimes can destroy network value. And we're thinking really thoughtfully about this. We don't have the answers right now fully on how to open this up. So I hope that that gives you just a little bit of color as to why you can't immortalize yourself today. But soon, hopefully, we hope like pixelated collections, collections that are funny, humorous, or are oriented around like individual creativity would definitely be able to link a personality pod and off you go, right? But the challenge is how do we then solve for the edge cases of like hate speech and all of that. I hope hopefully that that gives that makes some sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I completely understand the side where it can go completely wrong if because there are people in this world that that they're just going to do evil things. So I can see where it can go good and bad. So I do appreciate what you're saying, where not every project can just be thrown on there. That's just what something I wanted to get clarified. That I do like that idea, but how will you implement a future service where you can have a filter of how will that be filtered out in the future?
Sorry, Ricky, it got cut off at the last part, but I heard something about the future.
How will everything be filtered out to where like to where the right NFTs are saying the right things and that that they're doing good instead of something bad.
Oh man, that's such a difficult. That's yeah, man. I hope I am never. Let me put that humbly, and I say this without any like. I hope I'm never in a position to answer that question or influence it because the problem is any centralized shoulders that decide to answer that question, they are going to try to curate, mimic, and then censor human culture, right? And like if you look at the problems that YouTube has had or Twitter has had, the problem is like asking what good is. Like, is what Julian Assange doing, is that good? Is what Edward Snowden did, is that good? Is what Satoshi did, is that good? There are like these evolving markers in our culture and society that today these certain acts might look like really strange. Like when Satoshi's white paper was written, like I mean there were really educated scientists and philosophers and top minds that laughed it off and said this is hocus pocus, right? And we live in a society where that value marker of what is valuable, what is good, continues to shift because we as a species continue to evolve, right? So I think we may not reach that point, but I think a system that evolves and is self-learning is something we can sort of aspire towards, right? And I'm not trying to evade the question at all. I think it's just too difficult a question, and anybody who tries to give you a certain answer, like run far away from them, right? Like because then they're interested in their version of good and they want to impose it on you, you know. So yeah. Anyway, that's that. Hopefully that gives you some
No, it does,
context.
it does, it does. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to
Appreciate
answer all my questions.
it. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ricky. All right, let's bring on up the next speaker, Fire. Don't know if that. Oh yeah, hello. You might need to unmute and then feel free to ask a question. Your mic is still muted. Is an elevator music again. I'm gonna bring up someone else, Cooley, in the interim.
Zeneca, if it's all right, I have I mean, we can go for one or two more questions if that's okay, and then I have a little bit of a hard stop. I realize sometimes, hopefully that works for the session.
Yes, of course, of course. We'll make this the last question then.
Awesome.
Cooley, you are muted.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Hey, Coley, how you doing?
Yes, nice to meet you, Arif. First off, I want to say this is an amazing project. I'm glad to be a part of it. Um, I look forward to what the future holds for Alethea. Um, I had I was blessed with the opportunity with being a part of this project, purchasing some level 1, level 2 pods. And my question is coming from a diversity side of things. Like today, I went in and I tried to. I have a specific thing where I want my AI to go. I want it to represent history. Actually, similar to what the Revenants are, it's telling of untold history, right? And in my mind, I wanted to create Charles Young, which is a Buffalo soldier. It's a unit of soldiers that were tasked with protecting the national parks. These were Black soldiers that were the first Forest Service. And as I was going through there with that envisioned in my mind, I was looking for a voice or a name that, even though I was able to choose Charles, I couldn't choose the last name on it. But there wasn't a voice that I thought would represent a Black American on Alethea.
Mm-hmm.
And like also too, going through the Revenants and things like that, looking for, Black American input into this specific technology. Even though I love the technology, not ragging on it at all, I just was wondering if there was more of a plan to bring it more diverse.
Your audio is not quite working there, Arif.
Hey, Kuli, I missed the last part of the question. It may have gone on mute, but I did hear the first part, which was the ask around more diverse voices, and then it sort of cut out around like the Revenants, and you were saying that you wanted to see maybe more diverse Revenants. Is that a fair statement? Did I capture your question correctly?
Yes. Like for those of us that already have an idea, because I've even purchased NFTs around what I want my AI to represent, and also have an idea of the job and the task that I want my NFT to provide to the world. And right now, I don't see what I envision my NFT to represent in this space. So I was wondering, like, is that something that's planned out, or is that, something that, we can like start, or,
Yeah. So I got the last part, but it sort of cut off a little bit. So is that something planned out? That's the question, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Hopefully. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, great. So two parts there, Kuli, and honesty and sharing. Like I am just transparently an immigrant to the United States. I have learned and over the past couple of years understood like also just the history of violence that exists, but also the tremendous opportunity that does exist at the same time in a country like this, right? So the two parts here. One is when we designed the Revenants, and I'll just give some context here, we did approach, and because a lot of African American or Black civil rights leaders were really iconic characters. They have foundations or estates managing their IP posthumously. Does that make sense? So that means if we wanted to, let's say, bring someone like a Reverend Martin Luther King or Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, back to life, it would be too opportunistic of us to not work with the estate directly. So, and like let's say Muhammad Ali or any of these really iconic civil rights heroes that brought awareness to the plight that was happening, we have to work legally with the IP owners of those estates because we are dealing with IP. By IP, I mean like intellectual property that exist because these characters, these people, these figures, these heroes were transcendental in their message, they exist over time, and their message is so strong and resonant that there is the entire industries that are being built around it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just wanted to give you a clue into like the IP world, which is why we did not. I mean, we are in conversations with some partners who have, let's say, access to the IP, but it is going to take some time. So, which is one of the reasons, I love reggae music, but like bringing Bob Marley back to life, like I would work, we at Alethea or the DAO Alethea DAO would work with Bob Marley's estate and work closely with them to bring his message back to life, right? So there are certain characters, evidence, like the way they're structured, right? They're largely characters that are a little bit older, and they're iconic and historical, but they're not. We're not infringing on anybody's rights when we create these characters. I hope that that subtle point. But at the same time, I take your criticism and feedback as fair that it does lack the diversity and representation. But this was also like a design limitation on our part because it was only 100 collection that we could launch. And I think the other question on finding the right voice or the right African American voice, the right motif, the right language, the right structure, the cadence, the tonality, all of this is actually what we want to preserve. And so we will be launching this a little bit later next year, but it would essentially give you the opportunity to clone your voice in real time. That means you are the person who decides. Like if you go back to the earlier part of this AMA, you can clone your synthetic voice, you can shape it, you can train the AI on your synthetic voice or on the voice of another person that you want to record and you have their permission and consent for, which is also another part where, you know, like we have to be mindful of like how that entire ecosystem works, right? So definitely that's coming. The voices today that we have are somewhat trained on the Western canon and the language structure that presently AI models are have an existing bias towards. So even my accent, even my language, or even the way I speak is not it's not strongly represented because you know I have sort of a weird accent, having lived all over the world, right? At the same time, my desire and the desire of the team is actually to really genuinely represent the diverse tapestry that is humanity. It's just going to take creators like yourself to push the envelope, push the needle, push the envelope, and like actually ask us the right questions about how we can develop these diverse characters. The challenge here is what we found, like with like really iconic black and civil rights leaders or anybody that has really powerful history, like they have genuine estates and we have to honor their work and work with those estates. But once you start working with estates and foundations and groups like that, there's like it just becomes a far more longer, it's a longer process to educate them on NFTs. Then you say, oh, they're not just going to be NFTs, they're going to be INFTs. You have to educate them on INFTs. And so like for us, like this is like a really powerful opportunity to educate, and at the same time it's the easiest way that I found is I tell them, listen, there are these books, these powerful compelling books that have been written by leaders of a modern day America, really, right? And these books are collecting dust in the library, right? In the Library of Congress. We can bring these books to life with these INFTs, with these characters that can talk to people and educate them. And I hope, Kuli, with your pods, with the creations that you have, we'll get to a point where the system is mature enough to have different voices, but also different diverse characters. It's just from a design choice. In the earlier days, we were somewhat restricted by the 100 collection, but also restricted by the boundaries of how to work with IP owners. Now, hopefully that gives you a bit more color and context on the decision making.
Oh, it does. Thank you for that explanation. Specifically, look forward to the voice cloning feature and teaching. And one more question too, related to AI. Knowing what's going on, because I know that you come from Singularity Net, been going to all that good stuff, and knowing what they're doing with Singularity Net, the Singularity, and all this good stuff. Do you see Alethea helping that ecosystem by providing data to the Singularity? Like, is that the end goal for Alethea, or are you going to do your own thing separate from it?
I mean, for us, like, Ben has been a good friend and mentor for me for many, I think almost 4.5 years now. And I've had an opportunity to see the growth of SingularityNet, and I was there in its early days as it started and it grew. So it's been a real trip and journey to see their success. And also to try to, I'd like to say, like, I somewhat foolishly started this adventure just before the pandemic, right? Like, go figure, like the best timing possible, right? But the opportunity to build something like what we have is this opportunity to build INFTs is going to be integrated into ecosystems, let's say like SingularityNet, like Ocean Protocol, like all of these, like in this Fetch AI, that these amazing decentralized alternatives that are emerging that that are orienting for us, at least philosophically, and for me personally, orienting us towards a metaverse that bends towards the arc of decentralization, right? Like Martin Luther King himself said, like, not about the metaverse, but he said the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice, right? And if you look at the way the metaverse is structured today, it's really oriented towards dystopian ideals, right? Like, it's going very strongly in that direction. And for me, like, any project that like develops or pushes the boundaries of blockchain and AI or the metaverse, like, for us, as long as it's built on Web3 principles, we're happy to partner with. And Ben is also an old friend, and always happy to collaborate with him as well. All right, I think I have exhausted myself and also the audience with endless
Thank
dialogue.
you, Arif. Thank you.
Thanks, Cooley. I appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, Cooley.
But yes,
Yeah,
Zeneca, I think with that, if I can, I will take my polite leave. I really
absolutely.
enjoyed this AMA. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat and connect with your colleagues. I encourage all of you to join us on Discord and to follow us on Twitter as well, at real_Alethea. And tomorrow we will be having a really interesting thing called a token distribution auction, where the Ali token will essentially be released, and there will be an opportunity for everyone to participate in that. So yeah, I welcome everyone to do that. Zeneca, sorry, I've had
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. Take off. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I just tried to pin a tweet about that token distribution event, but it seemed to have not worked. Let me just try it again. Twitter Space is doing. There we go. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I recommend reading the article in that pinned tweet. It's such a cool project. I'm sure if you listen to even half of the space, let alone all of it, you'll have heard just how interesting Alethea is and these INFTs, and how passionate Arif is at just how passionate he is for the project and for this whole space, and how conscientiously he is thinking about everything. But yeah, we will wrap it up there because I am not an expert on Alethea, even though I have been researching a little bit over the last couple of weeks. I'm definitely going to dig into it some more. I think it's just such a super interesting project, and one that is worth keeping your eye on. I think just AI projects in general are worth keeping your eye on. We are seeing more and more of them sort of pop up and take off and get more attention. I think that's only going to accelerate in 2022 and not slow down as we see more projects try new interesting things, and existing AI projects innovate and also try new things, just because it's such a cool merging of tech, AI, and NFTs. So yeah, I recommend everyone joins the Alethea Discord, follows them on Twitter, and just checks out the project. I will potentially try and have Arif back on another spaces, because I'm sure there were questions that we didn't get to, and like we didn't even really talk about the token. So there's a lot more to the project, but yeah, again, I'm not an expert, so yeah, do your own research, but I recommend doing it. I hope everyone has a good morning, evening, afternoon, night. Take care. Oh, and this has been recorded. So if you missed the beginning, you can go back and listen to it. Just find this link, and you can listen to it for the next 30 days. I think Twitter saves it for. All right. Goodbye for real.